My name is Marcus, 32 years old, and I never thought I would see these words from my own mother. We changed all the locks on the front door and also the gate code. We no longer trust you. My stomach dropped as I stared at my phone. 10 years of paying their $5,600 monthly mortgage, and this was my thanks. I replied calmly, understood. Very smart. But I think you overlooked one thing. I had been too good a son for too long. If you're watching this from somewhere you've been taken for granted, drop a like and subscribe. Trust me. What happened next changed everything. Growing up, I had what most would consider an ideal relationship with my parents. My dad Walter was a hard-working construction foreman who taught me everything from changing oil to building a deck, while my mom Clara was the emotional backbone of our family. Always ready with advice or a shoulder to lean on. We weren't wealthy by any means, but we had enough, and most importantly, we had each other. Everything changed when I was in my senior year of college. Dad suffered a massive heart attack that left him with permanent cardiac damage. The medical bills piled up faster than autumn leaves. And suddenly, our modest family savings disappeared into a black hole of hospital stays and medications. I was 22, just about to start my career as a software engineer at a promising startup, when I became the primary breadwinner for our family. "Don't worry about us, son," Dad would say during our weekly dinners, his voice weaker than it used to be but still carrying that stubborn pride. "We'll figure something out with the house." The house. Our family home for over 25 years. A modest 3-bedroom ranch-style house in a decent neighborhood with good schools. The place where I had my first birthday party, learned to ride a bike, and brought home my high school girlfriend for the first time. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, or at least it had been until the medical bills started threatening foreclosure. I still remember the night I made the decision. Mom was sorting through bills at the kitchen table, the worry lines on her face deeper than I'd ever seen them. "What if I buy the house from you guys?" I suggested. "You'd have money for retirement and healthcare, and you could still live here. Nothing would really change." My parents were hesitant at first. "We can't take your money, Marcus," Mom protested. "You're not taking anything," I insisted. "I'm investing in real estate while helping my family. It's a win-win." After consulting with a financial advisor, we agreed on a fair market price. I took out a mortgage, paid off their remaining loan, and gave them the difference to bolster their retirement fund. The legal arrangement was simple but clear. I owned the house and paid the $5,600 monthly mortgage, while my parents continued living there rent-free. It seemed like the perfect solution. Then there was my sister Brittany. 3 years younger than me, she'd always been the family wild child. While I was saving for college, she was maxing out credit cards. When I was building my career, she was bouncing between jobs, apartments, and relationships. I loved her. But our approaches to responsibility couldn't have been more different. "You're such a suck-up," she'd tease whenever I helped our parents financially. "Always trying to be the perfect son." I didn't see it that way. To me, family meant supporting each other. If I had the means to help, why wouldn't I? For years, this arrangement worked smoothly. I rented an apartment closer to my office downtown, visited my parents regularly, and continued making those mortgage payments without complaint. I even covered property taxes and major repairs. My career thrived. I was promoted to senior developer, then project manager, and eventually became the chief technical officer at a successful tech company. Life was good. Then Brittany's marriage fell apart. After a messy divorce that left her financially drained, she moved back in with our parents. Temporarily. That was 18 months ago. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. During Sunday dinners, Mom seemed a bit more distant, and Dad would change the subject whenever I mentioned house maintenance or future plans. Small things, a cancelled lunch here, an unreturned phone call there. Nothing that raised serious alarms. Then came the Thanksgiving disaster. I brought Sandra, my girlfriend of 2 years, to meet the family. Throughout dinner, Brittany made pointed comments about people who think money gives them power, and real family versus financial transactions. Mom nodded along while Dad stared at his plate. Sandra squeezed my hand under the table, sensing the tension. "Is everything okay?" I asked as I helped Mom with the dishes afterward. "Fine, dear," she replied without meeting my eyes. "Brittany's just been helping us understand some things about our situation." "What situation?" "The house, Marcus. She thinks we should have gotten legal advice before selling it to you." That was the first red flag. I left that night with an uneasy feeling that something had fundamentally shifted. I just didn't know how bad it would get. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Like erosion on a riverbank, Brittany's influence gradually wore away at my parents' trust. What started as subtle comments evolved into outright accusations during the months following Thanksgiving. "I can't believe you're letting Marcus control your home," Brittany said during a family dinner in January. "I'd arrived early and overheard her talking to our parents in the kitchen. That house was supposed to be split between both of us someday. He helped us when we needed it," Dad defended weakly. "Or he saw an opportunity," Brittany countered. "Think about it. He got a valuable piece of real estate for way below what it's worth now." I entered the kitchen then, and the conversation abruptly changed to the weather. That night, I tried addressing it directly. "Mom, Dad, if you have concerns about our arrangement with the house, we should discuss them openly," I said as we sat in the living room after dinner. Dad looked uncomfortable. "No concerns, son. Everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. As winter turned to spring, my parents' health began deteriorating further. Dad's cardiac issues required additional medications, and Mom was diagnosed with early-stage arthritis. Their increasing vulnerability made them perfect targets for manipulation. In March, I received a call from our family friend Richard, who lived next door to my parents. "Just wanted to check if everything's okay with your folks," he said hesitantly. "Brittany was telling us about your plans to sell the house." My blood ran cold. "What plans?" "She mentioned you were looking at offers from developers. Said your parents might need to find somewhere else soon." I was speechless. Not only was this completely false, but it was the opposite of everything I'd done to ensure my parents could stay in their home indefinitely. The next day, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. I found Brittany at the dining table surrounded by papers, financial statements, the original house purchase agreement, and property tax documents I kept in a file cabinet in my old bedroom. "What are you doing?" I demanded. She didn't even look embarrassed. "Just trying to understand what you've been up to all these years." "There's nothing to understand. Everything is documented and transparent." "Is it?" She held up a bank statement. "Then why are property taxes so much higher than what you tell Mom and Dad? Are you making them pay the difference somehow?" "I pay the property taxes myself, Brittany. They don't pay anything." She smirked. "That's not what the county records show." Later, I discovered she had been looking at outdated records from before I purchased the house. Whether this misunderstanding was intentional or not, she was already spreading her version of events to our parents. The situation reached a boiling point at Dad's birthday dinner in April. What should have been a celebration turned into an ambush when Brittany raised a toast to Dad, who deserves to live his golden years without worrying about losing his home. She looked directly at me. "Some of us believe family homes should stay in the family, not become investment properties." I set down my glass. "That's exactly why I bought this house, so Mom and Dad could stay here without financial stress." "You stole my inheritance," Brittany shot back. "This house should have gone to both of us when the time came." "There wouldn't have been a house to inherit," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "It would have been foreclosed on years ago." Mom started crying. Dad looked pale. Sandra whispered that we should leave, but I couldn't walk away from this accusation. Later that night, I found my father sitting alone on the back porch. Dad, you know why I bought the house, right? It was never about taking anything from anyone. He sighed heavily. I know you meant well, son. But Brittany says we should have put the house in a trust for both of you. Says we gave up our equity. The equity was gone, Dad. The medical bills had eaten it all. Remember the foreclosure notices? He nodded vaguely, but I could tell Brittany's version had taken root. Over the following weeks, I discovered Brittany had been systematically lying about her own financial situation. While pleading poverty to our parents, she had actually received a substantial divorce settlement. She'd been unemployed not out of necessity but choice, using our parents' home as a convenient landing spot. I tried every approach I could think of to maintain my relationship with my parents. I brought over documentation showing all mortgage payments. I invited their longtime friends to vouch for my character and intentions. I even suggested family counseling. We don't need therapy, Mom said stiffly. We just need honesty. The implication that I had been dishonest felt like a slap across the face. By early summer, I could no longer deny the painful truth. My parents' perception of me had fundamentally changed. The son who had sacrificed to help them was now viewed with suspicion and resentment. All because of a narrative Brittany had carefully constructed to serve her own interests. Despite the growing tension, I continued making the $5,600 monthly mortgage payments without fail. Each payment felt less like helping family and more like being taken advantage of, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. This was my parents' home, regardless of what they now thought of me. In July, I received a concerning call from my mother's friend Barbara. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she said hesitantly, but your parents met with an attorney yesterday. Brittany drove them there. My stomach dropped. What kind of attorney? Real estate law, I think. Clara mentioned something about reversing a bad decision. I thanked her and immediately called my parents. The call went to voicemail. I tried 3 more times throughout the day with the same result. Finally, that evening, I received a text from my mother. We're fine. Just exploring some options for the future. 2 days later, I was summoned to a family meeting. When I arrived at the house, a middle-aged man in a suit was sitting at the dining table alongside my parents and Brittany. Marcus, this is Mr. Harmon, Mom said stiffly. He's helping us sort out some legal matters. Mr. Harmon extended his hand. I understand there might be some question about the ownership arrangement of this property. I stared in disbelief. There's no question. I've been paying the mortgage for 10 years. I have all the documentation. Your parents feel the arrangement was made when they were under duress. The lawyer replied smoothly. They're concerned they may not have fully understood the implications. The implication was that they would lose their home, I said, my voice rising. The implication was that I was helping them, not taking advantage of them. Brittany smirked. Yet here you are, owning their house. Convenient. The meeting deteriorated from there. Mr. Harmon talked about reconsidering ownership and family equity, while my parents avoided eye contact. I left feeling like I'd entered an alternate reality where everything good I'd done had been twisted into something sinister. The following weekend, I stopped by to drop off some medication for my father. Using my key, I entered the house and called out, but no one answered. I headed upstairs to leave the medicine in their bathroom, and was shocked to discover my childhood bedroom had been completely transformed. My remaining belongings had been boxed up and moved to the garage, and the room was now clearly Brittany's, with her clothes in the closet and her makeup on the dresser. While in the garage sorting through my boxes, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Several pieces of mail addressed to me, including bank statements and property tax notices, had been opened. Next to them was a notebook in Brittany's handwriting, detailing my financial information with notes like hiding money and offshore accounts. When I confronted her later by phone, she was unapologetic. Someone needed to look out for Mom and Dad's interests, she said. You've been taking advantage of them for years. By paying for their house? By making sure they have financial security? By stealing what should have been our shared inheritance. She snapped. And if you push this, I'll make sure everyone in the family knows exactly what kind of son you really are. My friends were becoming increasingly concerned. During a dinner with Sandra and our closest friends, Mike and Jessica, I broke down explaining the situation. You need to protect yourself legally, Mike advised. This has gone beyond family disagreement into potential fraud. Sandra agreed. I know you love your parents, Marcus, but Brittany is manipulating them, and they're allowing it. You can't just hope this will resolve itself. Getting legal protection doesn't mean you don't love them, Jessica added gently. It means you're being realistic about a toxic situation. I knew they were right. But taking action meant accepting that my relationship with my parents might never be the same. The family I had sacrificed so much for now viewed me as the enemy. The emotional toll was becoming unbearable. Throughout August, the situation continued deteriorating. My parents stopped answering my calls completely. Dad, who had always been my strongest ally, now only communicated through brief, formal texts. Mom, once warm and affectionate, became cold and businesslike on the rare occasions we spoke. I discovered they had been telling extended family members that I was threatening to evict them. Cousins who had once admired my dedication to helping my parents now looked at me with suspicion at a family reunion. The narrative had spread like wildfire. Marcus the opportunist. Marcus the manipulator. Marcus who took advantage of his parents' medical crisis to steal their home. Meanwhile, I continued making those mortgage payments, even as the emotional distance grew. Each payment felt like throwing money into a void of ingratitude, but stopping seemed unthinkable. These were my parents, after all. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to put them at risk of losing their home. But as summer turned to fall, I realized something had to give. My own mental health was suffering. Sandra was worried about me. My work performance was slipping. The situation had become unsustainable. You need to decide where your boundaries are, Sandra said one night as I stared sleeplessly at the ceiling. You can't keep giving everything while receiving nothing but abuse in return. She was right. Something had to change. I just never expected the catalyst would come in the form of a text message that shattered whatever was left of my illusions about my family. The message arrived on a Tuesday morning in September, just as I was heading into an important meeting at work. I almost missed it, but something made me check my phone one last time before silencing it. We changed all the locks on the front door and also the gate code. We no longer trust you. Please respect our privacy going forward. I read it 3 times. Unable to process that these words had come from my mother. 10 years of financial support, 10 years of ensuring they kept their home, 10 years of being the responsible son, and this was my reward. My hands shook as I excused myself from the meeting. In the hallway, I called my mother. No answer. I tried my father. Same result. I called 5 more times over the next hour, increasingly desperate to understand what had happened. Finally, on the 6th attempt, my father picked up. Dad, what's going on? Mom sent me a text about changing the locks? A long silence followed. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded distant, almost rehearsed. Brittany has helped us see things clearly. She deserves the house, Marcus. She's the one who truly cares about family. Dad, I've been paying the mortgage for 10 years. $5,600 every month without fail. How can you say I don't care? Money isn't the same as love. He replied flatly. Brittany says you only did it for the tax benefits anyway. That's absurd. Dad, please, let's talk about this in person. We have nothing more to discuss. Then, the final blow. Brittany deserves the house. She always has. The line went dead. I stood in the hallway of my office building, stunned and nauseous. My father's words echoed in my ears. Brittany deserves the house. Not a word about the decade of payments I'd made. Not a hint of gratitude for preventing foreclosure. Not even an acknowledgement of our original agreement. That afternoon, still reeling, I drove by the house. Sure enough, the security code on the gate no longer worked. Through the fence, I could see a locksmith's van in the driveway. They were actually changing the locks to keep me out of the house I owned and had been paying for all these years. As I sat in my car watching this surreal scene unfold, my phone buzzed with a message from Richard, the neighbor. "Just so you know, Brittany's been telling everyone you were planning to evict your parents next month. Said you were going to sell to developers who want to tear down the whole block. People are pretty upset. The fabrications were getting more elaborate and damaging." I couldn't understand how my parents could believe such obvious lies about their own son, or worse, if they knew they were lies but chose to believe them anyway. The next day brought another shock. While checking my mail, I found a certified letter from the Homeowners Association. Apparently, someone had filed multiple complaints about my harassment of the elderly residents at my parents' address. The letter warned that further incidents would result in legal action. The letter was the last straw. That afternoon, I made an appointment with Patricia Lane, a respected attorney specializing in real estate and family law. "Let me make sure I understand," Patricia said after I explained the situation. "You've been paying the mortgage on this house for 10 years. Your name is on the deed and loan. Your parents live there by verbal agreement. And now they've changed the locks and are accusing you of harassment?" I nodded miserably. "And your sister, who has contributed nothing financially, has convinced them she deserves ownership?" "That's the situation." Patricia's expression was sympathetic but firm. "Legally, your position is clear. You own the house. Your parents have no claim to change locks or bar you from entry. Your sister has absolutely no claim whatsoever." "But they're my parents," I said. "I can't just evict them." "No one's talking about eviction," she assured me. "But you do need to protect yourself. This situation has moved beyond family disagreement into potential legal jeopardy for you." She outlined several options, from formal written demands to court orders. But one simple action stood out as the most immediate response. "You could stop paying the mortgage," she suggested. "Legally, that's your right. It might be the wake-up call they need." The thought had crossed my mind, but hearing it from a legal professional made it seem more real and more justified. "Would that hurt my parents?" I asked, still concerned despite everything. "They would receive notices from the bank," Patricia explained. "Eventually, foreclosure proceedings would begin. But that takes months. And you could always resume payments if the situation changes. Right now, you're financially supporting people who have locked you out of your own property and are spreading damaging falsehoods about you." That night I barely slept. The decision weighed on me like a physical burden. On one side was a lifetime of family loyalty and the deeply ingrained belief that you take care of your parents no matter what. On the other was the painful reality that this loyalty was being exploited and weaponized against me. In the morning, I made my decision. With a heaviness in my heart, I called my bank and canceled the automatic mortgage payment scheduled for the first of the month. For the first time in 10 years, the $5,600 would remain in my account. "Are you sure about this?" Sandra asked when I told her. I wasn't sure about anything anymore. But I knew I couldn't continue enabling my own mistreatment. "Yes," I replied. "Something has to change." What I didn't know then was just how quickly that change would come, or how dramatically the tables would turn once financial reality intruded on Brittany's fantasy world. The first sign that my decision had registered came exactly 17 days after I canceled the mortgage payment. My phone lit up with a notification from my banking app. "Important message regarding loan number 4729. The bank had sent a formal notice of missed payment to all parties associated with the mortgage, including my parents, the co-borrowers on the original loan. Less than an hour later, my phone exploded with messages. First from my mother. There's some mistake with the mortgage payment. The bank says it wasn't paid. Then my father. Marcus. Call us immediately about the house payment. And finally, Brittany. What kind of sick game are you playing? Fix the payment now. I didn't respond to any of them. Patricia had advised against communication outside of legal channels now that the situation had escalated to this point. Instead, I forwarded the messages to her and tried to focus on my work, though concentration was nearly impossible. That evening, Sandra and I were preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. To my surprise, it was my father, looking aged beyond his years and visibly distressed. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice lacking the coldness of our last conversation. I let him in, though Sandra stayed close by, something we had agreed upon for any family interactions going forward. "The bank says you stopped the mortgage payment," he said after declining offers of water or coffee. "They're talking about late fees and potential credit impacts." "Yes," I replied simply. "I stopped paying." He looked genuinely confused. "But why would you do that?" The question was so disconnected from reality that I almost laughed. "Dad, you and Mom changed the locks on me. You told me you don't trust me and to stay away from the house. Why would I keep paying for a property I'm not allowed to enter?" "But that's different," he protested. "That was about personal issues. This is about the house. They're not separate issues, Dad. You can't ban me from a house and expect me to keep paying for it. That's not how this works." He seemed genuinely surprised by this logic, as if the connection between actions and consequences had never occurred to him. "But Brittany said," I interrupted gently. "What did Brittany say?" "That she would handle the mortgage? Does she have $5,600 a month to spare?" His silence was answer enough. "I've been paying that mortgage for 10 years, Dad. Every month, without fail. Even when you and Mom started believing the worst about me. Even when you stopped returning my calls. Even when you accused me of trying to steal from you. I kept paying because I love you both and wanted you to have security. But I can't keep financially supporting people who treat me this way." He left without resolving anything. But the confusion and worry on his face told me reality was beginning to crack through the fantasy Brittany had constructed. The next day, Brittany launched her counteroffensive. Her social media accounts suddenly filled with vague posts about elder abuse and financial manipulation, without naming me directly. She made it clear to anyone who knew our family that I was the villain in her narrative. When someone shows their true colors by using money to control vulnerable parents, that's when you know who they really are. One post read. The comments section filled with sympathetic responses from people who had no idea of the actual situation. I documented everything for Patricia, who was building a file in case legal action became necessary. "This is textbook defamation," she noted. "Keep records of everything." A week after the missed payment, I received an email from someone named Jonathan Keller, identifying himself as my parents' attorney. The subject line was direct. Urgent. Regarding mortgage payment and property ownership. We have a significant problem that requires immediate resolution. The email read, "Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss the missed mortgage payment and ongoing ownership arrangements for the property at 1742 Oakwood Drive." Patricia advised me not to respond immediately. "Let them sweat a little," she suggested. "They created this crisis, and now they're expecting you to rush to fix it. Take your time." I followed her advice, though it went against my natural instinct to solve problems quickly, especially when they involved my family. Instead, I focused on self-care, something I'd neglected during this ordeal. Sandra and I took a weekend trip to the coast. I resumed my morning runs. I started seeing a therapist to process the complex emotions of family betrayal. 2 more emails from Jonathan Keller arrived, each more urgent than the last. The final one, received exactly 2 weeks after the missed payment, was blunt. "We have a problem. Call immediately." By then, I had learned something interesting through Patricia's investigation. Jonathan Keller was not, in fact, a real estate attorney. He specialized in estate planning and had been Brittany's college roommate's husband. He had limited experience with property law and was clearly out of his depth in this situation. More significantly, Patricia discovered through county records that Brittany had filed paperwork attempting to add her name to the property deed, an action that constituted fraud since she had no legal claim to ownership. The filing had been rejected, but the attempt itself was damning evidence of her intentions. 3 weeks after the missed payment, the family communication strategy changed. Instead of demanding messages from my parents or threatening ones from Brittany, I began receiving conciliatory texts. "We should talk about the house situation," my mother wrote. "Perhaps we can find a compromise. Brittany says she might be able to help with the payments going forward," came another message from my father. I shared these with Patricia, who smiled knowingly. "The bank has probably sent the second notice by now. The reality of potential foreclosure is sinking in. Brittany's discovering that righteous indignation doesn't pay the mortgage." She was right. According to my mortgage terms, after 30 days of non-payment, the bank would send a formal warning of potential foreclosure proceedings. That letter would make the situation impossible to ignore or minimize. As the 30-day mark approached, the pressure intensified. Extended family members began calling, clearly having heard a version of events that cast me as the unreasonable one who was now endangering my parents' home out of spite. "Can't you just work this out for your parents' sake?" my Aunt Susan pleaded. "They're too old to handle this stress." Did they consider my stress when they changed the locks and accused me of planning to evict them? I asked quietly. Did they worry about my well-being when they let Brittany spread lies about me throughout the family? The conversations always ended uncomfortably. But I no longer felt the crushing guilt that had plagued me initially. Standing up for myself was becoming easier as the manipulative nature of the situation became clearer to everyone involved. Exactly 1 month after I stopped the mortgage payment, I received a call from an unexpected ally, Richard, my parents' neighbor. He had witnessed the unfolding drama firsthand and had finally seen enough to speak up. "I thought you should know," he said hesitantly. "Brittany's been trying to get loans using your parents' house as collateral. She brought some banker over last week, talking about accessing equity and refinancing options. Your dad seemed confused about the whole thing. This information was the missing piece that explained Brittany's desperate attempt to gain ownership. She didn't want the house for sentimental reasons. She wanted to extract money from it, potentially leaving our parents in an even worse financial position. With this knowledge, I finally felt ready to address the situation directly. The time for passive resistance was over. It was time for a family reckoning. The family emergency meeting was not my idea. Aunt Susan, my father's sister and the self-appointed family mediator, arranged it after receiving notice that the bank was initiating foreclosure proceedings on my parents' house. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at Susan's home, neutral territory for what everyone expected to be a difficult conversation. I arrived with 2 people, Sandra and Patricia Lane, my attorney. Brittany's eyes widened when she saw Patricia's briefcase and professional demeanor. "Why did you bring a lawyer?" my mother asked, her voice wavering between anger and fear. "For the same reason you changed the locks on my house," I replied calmly. "Protection." The room was tense. My parents sat together on the sofa, looking older and more vulnerable than I remembered. Brittany positioned herself protectively beside them. Aunt Susan, Uncle Greg, and 2 of my cousins completed the family contingent. Everyone watched warily as Patricia arranged documents on the coffee table. "Before we begin," Patricia said in her professional tone, "I want to clarify that Marcus has asked me to present factual information only. We're not here to initiate legal proceedings unless absolutely necessary." Brittany snorted. "Typical Marcus. Using money and power to intimidate us." Patricia ignored her. Let's establish the basic facts. Marcus purchased this property 10 years ago for $485,000, which was fair market value at the time. He has made every mortgage payment of $5,600 monthly until last month. That's a total of approximately $672,000 paid toward the property so far. She laid out documents showing the payment history, purchase agreement, and current property value, now estimated at $780,000. Additionally, Patricia continued, Marcus has paid approximately $86,000 in property taxes over the decade and roughly $42,000 in major repairs and maintenance. The room was silent as the numbers sank in. Almost $800,000 I had spent ensuring my parents could stay in their home. The verbal agreement was that Walter and Clara could live in the house indefinitely without paying rent. Marcus asked for nothing in return except that his investment be respected. My father shifted uncomfortably. My mother stared at her hands. In recent months, however, Marcus has been barred from the property he legally owns. He has been accused of intentions to evict his parents, which he never had. And most seriously, someone attempted to fraudulently add another name to the property deed. At this, Patricia slid a copy of Brittany's rejected deed modification across the table. The room erupted. That's a lie, Brittany shouted. This is a county record. Patricia replied evenly. The application was submitted in August with a forged signature purporting to be Marcus's consent. All eyes turned to Brittany, whose face had drained of color. I was just trying to protect Mom and Dad, she stammered. Marcus was going to sell the house from under them. That's not true, I said, speaking for the first time since Patricia began. I have never, at any point, considered selling this house while Mom and Dad need it. I bought it specifically so they would never have to worry about housing. Aunt Susan looked between us, confusion evident. Brittany, you told us Marcus was planning to sell to developers. You showed us those emails. What emails? I asked. Uncle Greg reluctantly pulled out his phone and showed me. There were indeed emails discussing the sale of the property to a development company, except they weren't from my email address. They were from a similar-looking address with one character different, clearly created to frame me. I never wrote these, I said firmly. This isn't even my email address. Look closely. As the deception became clear, Brittany's defense crumbled. I was just trying to prepare for the worst. He could have sold any time. But he didn't, my father said quietly, speaking for the first time. For 10 years he didn't. There was a heaviness in his voice that suggested the first cracks in the narrative Brittany had constructed. Patricia continued methodically, presenting evidence of my consistent financial support alongside documentation of the increasing hostility I'd faced. She showed the text messages, the lockout notice, the defamatory social media posts. Currently, the property is 1 month delinquent on its mortgage, she concluded. Without payment, foreclosure proceedings will continue. Given the equity in the home, the bank will eventually recoup their investment through forced sale, but that process would necessarily involve eviction of the current occupants. The stark reality hung in the air. My mother began to cry softly. So what do you want? Brittany demanded. To throw Mom and Dad out on the street to teach us a lesson? No, I said firmly. I want what I've always wanted, for Mom and Dad to be secure in their home. But I also want the truth acknowledged and this manipulation to stop. I laid out my conditions first. Brittany would need to move out. She had other options, including the money from her divorce settlement that she'd been hiding from our parents. Second, we would establish a formal living agreement in writing, protecting both my parents' right to remain in the home and my investment. Third, we would begin family therapy to address the damage done to our relationships. And if we refuse? Brittany challenged. Then I'll sell the house, I said simply. Not to hurt Mom and Dad. but because I won't continue pouring money into a situation that's being weaponized against me. I'll give them plenty of time and help them find another place. But I won't keep paying for my own abuse. My directness shocked everyone, including myself. For the first time, I was setting clear boundaries without guilt or apology. You wouldn't. My mother whispered. I don't want to. I corrected gently. But I also didn't want to be locked out of my own property. I didn't want to be accused of planning to evict you. I didn't want any of this. You all forced this situation, not me. There was a long silence. Then, unexpectedly, my father stood up and walked over to me. His eyes were wet as he looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in months. I'm sorry, son, he said, his voice breaking. I don't know how we let things get so twisted. I don't know how we could have believed all of it. The simple acknowledgement broke something open in the room. My mother began sobbing in earnest. Aunt Susan glared at Brittany, who was now staring defiantly at the floor. She said you were going to put us in a home. My mother managed between sobs. She said you were just waiting for the right moment to sell for a profit. She had documents, emails. All fabricated. Patricia interjected. And potentially constituting several criminal offenses. Brittany finally exploded. Oh, sure, take his side. Perfect Marcus, who swooped in with his tech money to save the day. What about me? This was supposed to be my inheritance too. He stole it. There was nothing to inherit, I replied, my frustration finally boiling over. The house was underwater because of Dad's medical bills. It would have been foreclosed on if I hadn't bought it. You weren't even around then. You were living in Seattle with your second husband. I would have helped if anyone had asked me. We did ask you, my father said quietly. 3 times. You always had reasons why you couldn't. This revelation silenced Brittany momentarily. She hadn't expected our father to contradict her version of events. The meeting continued for hours as years of misconceptions and manipulations were gradually unwound. Brittany alternated between defensive anger and tearful accusations. My parents struggled to reconcile what they'd been led to believe with the documented reality before them. The extended family watched in stunned silence as the full picture emerged. By evening, we had reached a tentative resolution. I would resume the mortgage payments, preventing foreclosure. Brittany would move out within 30 days. My parents and I would create a formal living agreement with Patricia's help. And most importantly, we would begin the process of family therapy to address the deeper issues that had allowed this situation to develop. As we prepared to leave, my father pulled me aside. I don't know if you can ever forgive us, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We should have trusted you. We should have remembered who you've always been. I didn't have an answer for him then. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too profound. But for the first time in months, I felt something other than hurt and anger when I looked at my parents. I felt the first tentative stirring of hope that something might eventually be salvaged from this painful chapter. Brittany stormed out without saying goodbye, slamming the door behind her. Her narrative had collapsed, and she wasn't ready to face the consequences of her actions. Whether she would eventually participate in the healing process remained to be seen. As Sandra and I drove home that night, I felt drained but lighter somehow. As if a burden I'd been carrying for months had begun to lift. Are you okay? Sandra asked, squeezing my hand. Not yet, I answered honestly. But I think someday I might be. The process of rebuilding what had been broken didn't happen overnight. Like constructing a house, it required laying a new foundation brick by brick, each one representing a small step toward healing. The first step was the formal living agreement, drafted by Patricia and signed by all parties. It stipulated that my parents could live in the house for the remainder of their lives, while acknowledging my ownership and financial contribution. We included clauses about communication, respect, and dispute resolution, things that should have been unnecessary between family members but now provided essential structure. Brittany moved out as agreed, though not without a final dramatic scene involving accusations and tears. She rented an apartment across town using money from her divorce settlement, funds she had previously denied having. For the first few months, she refused any contact with me and limited her interactions with our parents, positioning herself as the victim of family betrayal. The most difficult but crucial part of the resolution was family therapy. Dr. Melissa Cohen, a specialist in family dynamics and elder relationships, agreed to work with us. The first session was nearly unbearable, raw with unexpressed hurt, anger, and confusion. I need each of you to recognize that healing isn't about erasing what happened, Dr. Cohen explained in that initial meeting. It's about understanding it, acknowledging it, and finding a way forward that honors everyone's experience. My father struggled to articulate his feelings. I don't know how I let myself believe those things about you, Marcus, he admitted during our third session. You've never been anything but supportive your entire life. Cognitive decline and emotional manipulation are a dangerous combination, Dr. Cohen explained gently. Add in fear about financial security and housing in late life, and it creates a perfect storm of vulnerability. For my mother, the realization of how she had treated me brought overwhelming guilt. I was so afraid of losing our home, she confessed tearfully. When Brittany kept saying you had ulterior motives, I started seeing everything you did through that lens. I forgot all the good, all the sacrifices. Fear is a powerful distorter of reality, Dr. Cohen observed. And when that fear targets something as fundamental as housing security in older age, rational thinking often goes out the window. My own journey was equally challenging. I had to confront the anger and resentment that had built up during months of mistreatment. I had to examine why I had continued financial support even when faced with such ingratitude. And most difficult of all, I had to decide what kind of relationship I wanted with my family moving forward. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you don't love them, Dr. Cohen reminded me during a one-on-one session. In fact, healthy boundaries are essential for genuine love to flourish. Gradually, over many months, we established a new normal. I resumed my weekly dinners with my parents, though they felt different now, more honest, less performative. We talked about difficult topics instead of avoiding them. We acknowledged hurts instead of pretending they didn't exist. The financial arrangement continued as before. I paid the mortgage and major expenses, but now with explicit recognition and gratitude from my parents. My father insisted on contributing what he could from his pension, not because I needed it, but because it restored some sense of dignity and partnership to our arrangement. 6 months after the confrontation, Brittany unexpectedly asked to meet with me alone. We sat at a quiet corner table in a coffee shop, both tense and uncertain. I've been seeing my own therapist, she began, surprising me. She's helping me understand some things about myself. About why I did what I did. She couldn't quite bring herself to apologize directly, but she acknowledged that her actions had been problematic and driven by issues I didn't understand. It wasn't everything I might have hoped for, but it was a start. I was always jealous of you, she admitted after a long silence. You made everything look so easy: college, career, finances. I felt like a failure in comparison. When I moved back home and saw how much influence you had because of the house, something in me snapped. I wanted that power, that security. The house was never about power for me, I told her. It was about making sure Mom and Dad were okay. I know that now, she said quietly. I think I knew it then too, deep down. That almost made it worse. We didn't leave as friends, but perhaps as family members who might someday find a way back to something resembling a relationship. Brittany began attending some of the family therapy sessions, though her participation was inconsistent. Her presence added complexity but also opportunities for deeper healing. By the 1-year anniversary of the confrontation, much had changed. My parents had fully acknowledged the manipulation they participated in, taking responsibility for their choices while recognizing the factors that made them vulnerable. I had established clearer boundaries while finding a way to forgive without forgetting. And even Brittany was making halting progress toward greater self-awareness. The house that had become a symbol of conflict was gradually reclaiming its role as a family home. I started visiting more regularly again. Sandra was welcomed warmly. We celebrated holidays there, creating new memories to stand alongside the old. One evening, as my father and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset, something we'd done countless times throughout my childhood, he turned to me with tears in his eyes. "I want you to know," he said slowly, "that what you did for us with this house was the most selfless thing anyone has ever done for me. And the way we repaid that kindness was unforgivable." It wasn't unforgivable, Dad, I replied. Difficult, painful, but not unforgivable. How did you find it in yourself to keep trying with us? I'm not sure I could have. I thought about it for a moment. Because family is worth fighting for, I said finally. Not blindly or without limits, but worth the effort to try to understand and heal. I needed to stand up for myself. But I also needed to leave the door open for reconciliation. The journey taught me profound lessons about family, boundaries, and self-respect. I learned that love without boundaries isn't really love at all, it's codependence. I discovered that standing up for yourself doesn't mean giving up on relationships that matter. And most importantly, I realized that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, it's about creating space for a different future. Today, my relationship with my parents is stronger than before. Built on honesty rather than obligation. My relationship with Brittany remains complicated but is no longer toxic. And my relationship with myself has transformed entirely. I no longer measure my worth by how much I sacrifice, but by how authentically I live my values while maintaining healthy boundaries. The mortgage payments continue, but they no longer feel like a burden. They're simply part of how I express love for my family. A love that now comes with clear expectations of mutual respect. The house stands as a testament not just to financial investment, but to the harder, more valuable investment in working through conflict toward genuine understanding. If you're facing a similar situation with family dynamics that have turned toxic, remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Setting boundaries isn't punitive, it's protective. And forgiveness isn't about condoning what happened, it's about freeing yourself from being defined by it. Has your family ever tested your boundaries in ways that required you to take a difficult stand? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember to like this video if my story resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories of family challenges and resolutions, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything as we navigate these complex human experiences together. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, true family strength comes not from avoiding difficult truths, but from facing them together.